higher level essay is the main assessment that we work on in this first year of IB Lang and Let HL. And it's only done in the HL course. And so this higher level essay is a 1,200 to 1,500 word academic essay. I have, this little infographic that I made available up on the slide if you want to take a look at it. It kind of walks you through a few of the elements of the essay that we'll cover in this presentation. So again, 1,200 to 1,500 word academic formal essay. The essay will have a linguistic or a literary focus. And so for a non-literary text type, those bodies of work that we've studied in class, you want to make sure that you are bringing in some linguistic analysis into your essay. So for that reason, and I'll mention this again in just a second, the Kaczynski illustrations might not be the best choice. We're just finding that students who are choosing just the visual texts for their HL essay are struggling. And so I would encourage you to choose one that has some linguistic element beyond just the visual, right? So a more multimodal if you're looking at the non-literary texts. Again, we'll kind of talk about this in just a second. This essay should be an argument. You're going to create a line of inquiry and then you're going to answer it. You shouldn't be describing the text, but you should be formulating an argument that answers your line of inquiry. And this essay is more than just a thematic analysis. So it shouldn't look exactly like your Carol Ann Duffy, thematic analysis or comparison. It should extend beyond just the text, most likely. So when we look at the text that we've studied in this class, and again, your HL essay can explore either a literary text. So our literary texts are 1984, Duffy and Lahiri, or it can explore a non-literary work. Our non-literary works are the Time Person of the Year covers, the Nike ads, the Powell Kaczynski illustrations, Michelle Obama speeches, the Vox open sourced videos, and the Lemonade visual album. In past years, we've been able to cram a bit more in, but I think that you have at least an okay amount to choose from in those non-literary works. I put a little asterisk again by the Time Person of the Year covers and the Kaczynski because I don't think that those texts are the best ones for the HL essay. So I put a little proceed with caution next to those. I would strongly advise against using those texts for this particular assessment. So let's see. You may use more than one text from collections. So for example, if you're going to look at the Nike ads, or you're going to look at the open sourced videos, or you're going to look at the Duffy poems, you can choose like more than one text from that work. So just keep that in mind. You also need to remember that once a text is used for the HL essay, and by that text, I mean, if you use any Duffy poem or any Nike ad, you cannot use those works, those texts again. So you wouldn't be able to use Medusa for your HL essay and then Mrs. Lazarus for your individual oral. So this will most likely come in play with that individual oral piece. That individual oral, just to remind you, so that way, again, moving forward, you can kind of keep in mind what text you're choosing. The individual oral is the one where you look at a literary text and a non-literary text and then explain how they address a global issue. We examined one example together. That was the 13 Reasons Why and the Salome. So we listened to the example of the student explaining how 13 Reasons Why and Carol Ann Duffy's Salome both explore the issue of female promiscuity. And so if you are taking the course next year, you're going to want to make sure that if you have a brilliant idea to connect, to two works, then maybe you don't use either of those works for your HL essay. And then once you use a text for the HL essay, you also cannot use it for your paper 2, and that would apply for the literary work specifically. Paper 2 is done senior year, and it's a comparative theme analysis. So these aren't the only works that you'll be covering. You'll look at more as you continue on with the course. There's some exciting texts I think that you use that you'll want to use even more than these. So you're not limited to these, but I do want you to know moving forward that once you choose a text for your HL essay, it can't be used again for an official IB assessment. So there is that. Moving forward, most likely you will use a course concept as a cornerstone for your paper. You could also use an area of exploration as a way in, not using the questions exactly, but using them kind of as inspiration. And when we look at the line of inquiry brainstorming sheet, I'll show you an example of that. You could also use a literary theory. Most of us will not do this, but for those of us who are really into, psychoanalytical theory or feminist theory or Marxist theory, maybe this is one way into a text for us. Again, we'll look at the line of inquiry brainstorming template, and I'll show you some examples for that. This sheet right here will take you to Cambridge University resource that just talks about the course concepts. And you also have work that we've done in class covering those course concepts. Your HL essay will most likely require some outside research. So your line of inquiry should be most likely be broad enough that you're going to have to give either some context or some information on the topic, the concept that you're studying. So for example, what outside research might be needed for this line of inquiry question? To what extent does Don DeLillo's White Noise criticize postmodern American culture in the 1980s? If you could just yell out right now, what's something that you might need to research and go to an outside source for in order to answer this question?
What life was like in the 1980s?
Yeah, absolutely. So something about post-American culture in the 1980s. Postmodern American culture in the 1980s. Absolutely. And so you would do a little bit of outside research, consult some sources, and then bring that into your ultimate, HL essay, to your final draft. In what ways does the Alan Parsons Project's Tales of Mystery and Imagination offer a transformative rereading of Edgar Allan Poe's tales? So the primary text here is that Alan Parsons Project. What's the outside research that might need to be done in order to answer this question?
The impact of the project, probably.
Yeah, the impact of the project. So if we're saying a transformative rereading, that could be interesting. And then also one way to think about this would be, if you're looking at Duffy, a rereading, how does, Medusa offer you wouldn't use this exactly, but a transformative rereading of the original Greek myth. You probably have to do some research or consult an outside source for that original Greek myth, right? So just, again, you don't have to use outside research, but most likely some outside sources will benefit your paper. The HL essay is assessed using all 4 criteria. So knowledge and understanding, analysis. The difference between these two, I put a little box here. Crit A really looks at what is the constructed meaning, right? What is the concept? Do you understand the concept, the topic? Do you understand the characteristics of this text type? Crit B is analysis. So how is that meaning constructed? right? So this would be, what is the constructed meaning? This is, how is that achieved? Those authorial choices. This is really what we've been working on mostly this year. And again, I want to say your Duffy essays are really nicely done. I can see just so much growth, and that you're really understanding how to walk through that identification of the choice, the effect on the reader, and then how that ultimately makes an argument. You're also going to be scored on focus, organization, and development, and use of language. And this image is a screenshot of a doc that is available to you. It's linked in the PowerPoint, and I think it makes a nice checklist for you as we work through drafting our essay. So if you are, and I hope most of you are, if you are going to test an IB Lang and Let HL, which again, highly recommend you do. There's a lot of college credit to be earned, more than just, writing 121. So I really encourage you to test in the course. You're knocking out one of the 4 assessments right now. And so this assessment will be 20% of your IB grade for the 2-year course. This essay will be revised next year. So that might, be comforting for you to know that it will not just be work that's done in the next couple of weeks, that's 20% of your grade, but you'll also have an opportunity to revise this essay next year. It's graded externally. And so before you send it out, you'll have an opportunity to get eyes on it again and get a little bit more feedback perhaps. And then for this course, it'll be a final. It'll be for all 4 criteria summative assessment, and you'll present an abbreviated analysis to the class. Somehow, I haven't quite figured out the details for this, but it'll either be in small groups or a whole class quick presentation of what your line of inquiry was, how you went about answering it, and your biggest takeaways. Our process is going to look like this. So we're starting with this line of inquiry brainstorming sheet due on Wednesday evening. I am going to wrap this up pretty quickly here again, so you can get to that sheet. This will be, because I want you to take it, seriously. I want you to put time into it. This will be a summative assessment for Crit C, Focus, Organization, and Development. Your outlines will be due on January 11th, and we'll move from the outlines to drafting, and our final draft will be due on January 19th. And again, that will be on all 4 criteria. I have linked sample HL essays on this page. This was the one I gave you before break that I encouraged you to read. Any in-depth, looking annotations or notes or thinking about these samples beyond what we've done in class would be great for your learner portfolio entries. I believe these are a little stronger, I think, than this Monobo one. However, this one has comments, and so I would take a look at the teacher feedback in this one. I think it could be very helpful for you. All right, so I'm going to pause real quick because I need to grab my my charger because my computer is going to die, and I'm going to turn off our recording. But go ahead and consider these questions, and I'll be right. Zoom my recording real quick. So the purpose of this page, again, is to consider your interests. What texts were you most engaged with? Which one did you find most compelling? Because most likely that will be the one that you have most success writing about. And another thing to consider, again, as you get going, are you taking the 2nd year of IB, and do you have a brilliant idea for individual oral that that might make you want to save a text for that assessment instead of using it for the HL essay? But again, you'll continue reading and new texts, and so you won't be limited to these for the rest of the course. You'll read some exciting new ones. I think the texts for next year are great. I know you read Persepolis and maybe some Kendrick Lamar. I think it's good. So this is the line of inquiry brainstorming sheet that I'll go ahead and hop onto right now. This is, I think, maybe the most helpful document because it's quite possible that developing the line of inquiry is the most difficult part of this process. So read through this carefully. I'm not going to read through it all right now in class, but I think that, look especially at the places I've highlighted. I tried kind of, drawing your eye to elements that we might be able to use with the text we've studied. This one kind of walks you through the concepts, and under each concept, and I think this is probably the most helpful, under each concept, it gives you a line of inquiry example. None of them use the text that we've used because I don't want to take those ideas away from you. But for example, for Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, how does Ellison succeed in making his narrator a convincing spokesperson for the concerns of African Americans in the 20th century? And so you can kind of see how this sets the student up to do some nice literary analysis, right? Making his narrator a convincing spokesperson, but then also showing some understanding of this broader idea of the concerns of African Americans in the 20th century. And you can look under each concept at some of the lines of inquiry, that are given. And then this number 2 here is another way in. If you don't like the concepts and the conceptual way in, this is looking at like theory. So if this is something that you're interested in, you're welcome to jump into, kind of a theoretical approach. Finally, in the turquoise column in our calendar, the areas of exploration have lived, and these questions have kind of been guiding us. You will not take directly a question, but you can look at how these questions might lead to a line of inquiry for an HL essay. So under each kind of bullet pointed questions, there's an example of one that might work. So for example, time and space. In what ways do advertisements for the ACLU offer insight into American culture in the late 20th and early 21st centuries? And so that's kind of showing how a text can offer insight into a specific culture, right? So it's taken this question and made it more specific. Right now in this process, I would not panic, and I would not try and go straight to the line of inquiry. I would think about like what text you want to land on, what do you find most interesting, what concepts make sense to you, or what concepts do you see in the text that you really like, and you will start working on this developing lines of inquiry brainstorming template. And so it doesn't have to be 20 pages long, but I do want you to look at 2 different texts. One might be a little shorter than the others. Maybe you try your hand at one that you're only kind of considering, and then when you are feeling pretty confident that you've got one, really put your head down and really be thorough in your answers for that specific text. This left-hand column shows you an example of a student who is considering using the We Believe the Best Man Can Be campaign by Gillette that came out a couple years ago about toxic masculinity. And so if you want to watch through those ads and then kind of look at how a student might work through and develop a line of inquiry, you're welcome to do that. Okay, so I think that's where we are. And then the last thing on here is this little organizer, and just so you know, that's optional. So tomorrow we will meet. I'm going to put you into a group with other students who are considering the same text you are. And I'm going to ask you to look at like what resources you could use if you studied that text, what terms you'll most likely use in any analysis of that text, what the text type features are. So if it's a visual album, what does that mean as a text type? Like what are the features of a visual album versus something else? And so you'll do some work tomorrow, again, continuing to just brainstorm for your line of inquiry. Okay, I'm going to turn off our recording.